All right, let's dive straight into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the absolutely mind-bending scope of one of the world's most comprehensive exams. We're going to transform 100 dense, rigorous questions into a fascinating tour of modern knowledge. You know, if you really want to understand how a nation selects the generalist minds meant to lead its bureaucracy, looking at their entrance exam is the absolute best place to start. We're going to decode the sheer volume of facts, logic, and ethics these candidates are expected to master. Before we even get to the actual questions, just think about the high-stakes environment these candidates face before the clock even starts ticking. The instructions are incredibly rigid. Do not write anything else. Only one response. There is literally zero margin for carelessness here. The tone is set instantly, right? This is a serious, highly structured evaluation of administrative potential. But here's the real kicker. The true psychological weight of this test comes down to a single fraction. A 1/3 penalty for every wrong answer. This rule fundamentally changes the game. It harshly punishes blind guessing. So you aren't just tested on what you know, you're actively tested on your risk assessment skills. Knowing what you don't know becomes a vital survival mechanism. To make sense of this 26-page booklet, we've organized the chaos into 4 thematic journeys: Earth and environment, tomorrow's technology, rules of governance, and finally, the generalist mind. To truly grasp the unbelievable breadth required of these candidates, it's honestly a bit of cognitive whiplash. On one hand, you need a deep knowledge of Pleistocene-era rivers and the ability to decipher empty seats in early Buddhist iconography. Then you flip a few pages, and suddenly you're being tested on the mechanics of green hydrogen and whether GPS spoofing is a valid counterattack against drone swarms. The scope is just wild. Let's kick things off with Section 1. Earth and environment, global to local. Take question 29, for example. The exam asks candidates to identify correct facts about Lake Turkana. It's a brilliant way of testing their grasp of global geography, their awareness of UNESCO heritage sites, and their ability to pinpoint physical locations on the African continent, all entirely from memory. What's fascinating about this breakdown is how it forces you to synthesize 3 highly specific data points. Is it the largest desert lake? Is it in South Sudan? Is it the Jade Sea? A candidate might know 1 or 2 of these facts, for sure. But finding the single correct answer code requires absolute certainty across the board. Otherwise, you risk that devastating 1/3 penalty we talked about earlier. But obviously, a modern public servant can't just live in the past, right? They have to govern the future. And that brings us to Section 2, tomorrow's technology, grasping the frontier. You might legitimately wonder, how on earth does a traditional paper and pencil general studies test tackle cutting-edge tech? Do they just ask broad, easy questions about computers? Absolutely not. This exam dives straight into the actual under-the-hood mechanics of modern tech, like artificial intelligence. Let's look closely at question 67. This isn't some vague query about whether AI exists. It focuses entirely on the specific functionality of large language models, or LLMs, the exact technology driving the current AI boom. The brilliance here is how it actively filters out candidates who just skim the headlines. Statements 1 and 2 perfectly describe how LLMs work, assigning probabilities and using mathematical optimization. But statement 3? That's a trap. The test brilliantly snares the uninformed by sneaking in the completely false claim that LLMs produce unbiased outputs. It directly tests if the candidate actually understands current tech discourse, where AI bias is, as we know, a massive ongoing challenge. All right, shifting gears to Section 3, rules of governance, the mechanics of state. Question 63 is a perfect example of the nuts and bolts of administration. It demands a highly granular understanding of the country's financial and regulatory history. You can't just know that the economy exists. You have to know the specific architects who shaped its rules over the decades. To earn just a single point on this question, a candidate must memorize and correctly associate all these specific architects of the economy. Malhotra for insurance, Gupta for derivatives, Patel for bank lending, Malagam for microfinance. It proves that an administrator's toolkit has to be built on the very specific foundation of past policy decisions. But it's not all macroeconomics on trial here. Take question 87, which tests incredibly vital civic knowledge regarding a zero FIR. This represents a major shift from abstract policy down to everyday citizen rights and the actual criminal justice framework. Basically, a zero FIR allows a crime to be reported at any police station. It completely bypasses immediate jurisdictional roadblocks so an investigation can start right away. This highlights how the exam demands candidates understand the specific legal mechanisms designed to protect vulnerable citizens who are facing bureaucratic hurdles during an emergency. And that brings us to our final theme, Section 4, to generalist mind, ethics, and application. We culminate with question 78. Now, this isn't a multiple-choice history fact. It's a dense, multi-paragraph ethical scenario. In it, a mid-level official, referred to as Miss X, discovers unproven allegations of corruption involving a public infrastructure project. Unlike the previous sections, there is no simple math formula or historic date to apply here. The contractor's past is super shady but legally unproven. Her boss is explicitly telling her to keep quiet to save the project's timeline, but her conscience screams transparency. This is a test of pure administrative judgment and ethical fortitude. You have to weigh these options incredibly carefully. Do you go nuclear and disclose everything to the public, potentially stalling vital infrastructure over a rumor? Do you punish the contractor without legal proof? Or do you take the nuanced path, proposing a limited disclosure to an oversight committee to maintain integrity while keeping the project moving? Balancing the public's right to know against procedural fairness is pretty much the ultimate test of a civil servant. Bringing it all together, this entire explainer shows us that navigating this booklet is really about proving you have the bandwidth to handle a deeply complex modern world. You have to pivot seamlessly from the rivers of antiquity to the algorithms of tomorrow, and from strict financial codes to the gray areas of human morality. And you're doing all of this while a ticking clock and a brutal penalty system punish your every misstep. Which leaves us with one final thought to wrap up this explainer. Looking at the sheer volume of knowledge required to govern today and the ethical tightropes you have to walk, if you were sitting in that quiet exam hall right now, staring down these 100 questions, how prepared are you to make those hard calls?